Hello and welcome to the Brodart Tell Me More Diverse Voices webinar. We have webinars every month on the first Wednesday of the month. Today we have four wonderful authors that are going to be sharing their new books. And Carol Liebers has joined us again. She has been, she moderated for us last year. Carol is the director of libraries for the Kansas City Public Libraries system. She's the director of 5 library systems, a fleet of 3 mobile libraries and 40 school libraries. And Carol has also been very active in a lot of different types of volunteer work in foundations, charities, and nonprofit organizations. And she was also recipient of I Love My Librarian Award. So Carol, welcome, and thank you for joining us again this year.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Elenita. I appreciate and I am so excited to be back and for Brodart to invite back as a moderator again. The first author that we will be speaking to is Catherine Adele West. And she's a writer and editor living on the south side of Chicago. Her experience as a Black woman shapes every aspect of her writing, and she is sure to be a voice for many women. Her work has been published in Gay Magazine, Black Fox Literary Magazine, 5 to 1, Better Than Starbucks, Doors Ajar, 805 Lit Plus Art, the Helix Magazine, Lunch Ticket, and most recently, the Skill Basin Literary Journal. And the book that we will be discussing is The Two Lives of Sarah, and I believe that is her second novel. Welcome, Catherine.
Thank you so much, Carol. I appreciate being here and appreciate you all having me. You're absolutely right. My debut novel, Saving Ruby King, came out June of 2020. And this, The Two Lives of Sarah, is my sophomore novel. It's somewhat of a companion novel to Saving Ruby King, but it's not exclusive to that book, and it can be read separate in any order. A lot of people asked me, you know, what I was going to do for my second book. And I knew what I wanted to write. I knew I wanted to write about Sarah before I even finished, Saving Ruby King. There's like a last little part, like, the last few chapters. And I talk about how Sarah, who's one of the main character's grandmother, went to Memphis and had this life-changing time in Memphis. Happy, funny, tragic, this time in Memphis that forever shaped who she was as a woman. And when I composed the scene with Sarah, I just couldn't get it out of my head. Like, who was Sarah going to be? Who was she apart from her trauma? What made her laugh? What did she want to do with her life? Who was Sarah King? And the answers to those questions are in my book, The Two Lives of Sarah. Like, who knew a backstory and, a few little lines of prose can just turn into a whole novel? I didn't. I found out. When my curiosity kind of finally got the better of me, I started to research, but I'm not gonna lie, I was super scared. I was scared of my character, her anger, what she was gonna do. I didn't know what she was gonna do. Like, how can someone so guarded see the world as a hopeful place? That's one of the things I wanted to kind of answer. But, I just kind of continued to press on. And in doing so, I found out, there was a lot to admire about Sarah. Sometimes I was super frustrated writing this book, but I found the courage to write a story that some people would say probably doesn't have a happy ending, but not all books have to have those. But there's hope, and there's always hope in literature and hope in stories told. For me, the real struggle was, finding the right characters for my book, but it was so enthralling to create them. One of the characters, Jonas, he's in the book too. It almost kind of broke me because it was kind of a crazy tightrope to walk, because I wanted to write somebody who wasn't like Prince Charming type of character. Like, women, we don't always, we don't need somebody to come save us. I needed someone who had their own difficult past, but yet was able to still see the potential of the world and the people in it, despite it being 1960s Memphis, Tennessee, and him being a Black man. Like, if there's any way to see hope, Jonas was gonna see it, and that's what I greatly admired about him. But simply put, I needed to create someone human, not a fantasy. And besides, Sarah doesn't need a Prince Charming. She needs a partner. And she needed somebody who wasn't afraid of her prickliness and her temper and her guarded nature, because it's just, a defense mechanism to her previous trauma. Other characters in my book, Mama Sugar and Mr. Van Ellis, they were easy to write. A lot of times writers come from what they know. I based Mama Sugar on a lot of different elder Black women that I knew, and Mr. Van Ellis was kind of solely based in large part on my uncle. Mama Sugar was like this collection of personalities. My grandmother, older woman from my church, the women who'll say like some funny things or some slick things, and you don't recognize what they said until like 5 minutes later, and you like, did she just talk about this part? Oh, I didn't. But like they'll just say something so slick and just leave. Like, there are just so many instances of that. But I mean, I found it hilarious. But there's always wisdom in the things that, that are taught to me by my elders. And then my uncle, my great uncle, who I based Mr. Van Ellis on, who's another really awesome character in the book. He was always a really kind and gentle man, and like nothing really rattled him. But the thing about the book and about my characters are that they're always secrets. And even in my real life with the elders that I was around, there were always secrets, and I could never breach those kind of depths because it was labeled as like grown folks' business. And even though I'm like in my 40s now, when elders talk, that's still grown folk business. I don't care. That's just how it is. I might as well still be like 4 years old to them. And it was done in a way of protection, but it also can kind of compound trauma, because if certain things aren't told, then, you're kind of bound to repeat the same patterns. I mean, it's selfless, but it's also kind of foolhardy. But, you can't force anybody to, become unburdened. And, a lot of those people are gone now, and I pay homage to them and those particular characters. The Two Lives of Sarah is like the first historical fiction novel I've ever written. My first novel, Saving Ruby King, was contemporary. With The Two Lives of Sarah, I had to dig deep because this, once again, takes place in early 1960s Memphis. I'm an 80s baby, so I knew nothing about growing up in Memphis as well, because I was born and raised, as Miss Carol said, on the south side of Chicago. But I read a lot of books and newspaper articles. Google, of course, is my best friend. But most importantly, I found Native Memphians and was able to do some physical interviews, talk to them about what it was like to grow up in Memphis, and what was the good, what was the bad, what was the ugly. And a lot of the things that were incorporated into The Two Lives of Sarah are so authentic, because I was talking to, authentic people with authentic experiences who, told me, the low down, deep nitty gritty of what really went on. And I spent the better part of about 2 months figuring out exactly where in Memphis the story would take place. Eventually, I settled in the community of Hyde Park, because Chicago also has a Hyde Park community, and I kind of thought it was a good omen. Originally, I planned on traveling to Memphis. The pandemic, unfortunately, put a damper on that. But, I learned to pivot. So if I couldn't roam the streets, if I couldn't interact with people face to face, if I had to forego some delicious food, what else was possible? So, like I said, in speaking with, a fellow author, I was put in touch with, these people, and, I'm forever just grateful for them for, sharing their stories. And in the book also, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm a bit curvaceous. Food is a huge part of this book. Food is an expression, it's freedom, it's love, it's asking forgiveness, but not having to say you're sorry. It's like, food is an unspoken language because sometimes words simply are enough. But a good meal, one made with, passion and precision, it can say what we can't. The funny thing is, I got so enamored with the food, like half the book was about food. So my wonderful editor, Laura Brown, had to reel me back. So I had to trim some of the scenes in the kitchen between, Sarah and Mama Sugar. Because in those scenes, I was going through meticulous detail. I was telling you how to fry hash browns and, clarify the butter because it'll make the hash browns crispy. Like I was going through all of that. That wasn't necessary. But, I just was so taken with like this idea of food and food as an expression. But we thank the Lord for editors. So in terms of the two lives of Sarah, one thing that I did was I vigorously and intentionally inundated this book with culture and Blackness and laughter, amongst some tears. Literature, music, fashion, art. I want every reader to discover or reacquaint themselves with different literature. So for instance, the poems of Langston Hughes, the works of James Baldwin, Zora Neale Hurston, so many other literary icons. And then finding and referencing the right music during in the book was one of my favorite parts of researching. I was listening to music from like Sam Cooke, Nina Simone, Bobby Bland, the Marvelettes, the Flamingos. Like I want my readers to feel like they're there. I want my readers to see the name of a song or hear the song described and just be transported back to a place and time that was, wonderful for them. And then there's another part, I definitely incorporated Black education, historically Black colleges and universities, Spelman, Morehouse, Howard, and their history into the lives and the backgrounds of the characters. Because like I'm telling a story about African Americans apart from the proximity of whiteness, because our lives really aren't defined by the racism around us, and our ability to express joy and love and happiness, anger and tragedy and sadness without it being about race and racism. That was one of the most important things for me in writing this book. That was paramount because African Americans, we're more than just our struggle. And Sarah represents more than just her struggle. But most importantly, I wanted people to see Sarah truly and fully in her moments of happiness, however fleeting, and in her somber moments, no matter how deep they are. Sarah King is a fierce and independent woman. And yeah, that sometimes means she's messy and she's petty and she's cruel, but she's also vulnerable and she's brave and she's deeply loving. She's all of those things. But the characters in this book love her all the same. And in closing, I hope all of you will love her as much as I do. Thank you all so, so much.
Thank you, Catherine. The book is, the moment I started it, I just wanted to finish it. So I haven't finished it yet. I'm almost done. So I appreciate that. Somebody said, Lisa Cross-Smith, author of Whiskey and Ribbons. And so that wrote, So We Can Glow. West is a bold, exciting new voice in fiction. With honesty and compassion, she brings readers beyond the headlines into the real South Side of Chicago, where love, church, and family abide. She makes us think not only about saving Ruby King, but about finding our own redemption as we save ourselves individually and collectively. In this assured debut, West definitely breathes life into this community with characters you'll cry with and root for long after the last page. So thank you. I know that Elenita told us that each one will need 10 minutes. So I don't want to spend too long on each one, but I just wanted to share that with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
The next one is Alexis Henderson. Alexis is the author of the Goodreads Choice Awards finalist, The Year of Witching, and the forthcoming House of Hunger. When she's not writing, you'll find her tending to an assortment of houseplants or nursing a hot cup of tea. Somebody quoted, and it's an author in residence, South Carolina. Charleston, South Carolina. House of Hunger is gorgeous and lustily dark, a nightmare vision that will pull you into its terrifying grip. Alexis Henderson is a master at creating enthralling fear. That's what Simone St. James of New York Times bestselling author of the Book of Cold Cases said. Welcome, Alexis.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here with all of you guys and hear about your books. It's great. So House of Hunger is my second novel, and it is a sapphic Gothic horror novel. It follows my main character, Marion, who has grown up in this fantasy world that's inspired by Victorian England. And she is very impoverished. She works as a maid and is just kind of trying to claw her way through a very difficult world despite her her kind of poor circumstances. And one day she sees an ad in the newspaper that is advertising this position. It's called a blood maid, and blood maids offer their blood for nobles to drink in the North. And she applies to this position to become a blood maid. And she's accepted and brought into this world that's full of like decadence and luxury. There she meets a woman named the Countess Elizabeth, and they develop a very, I'll say a dark and complex, I hesitate to call it a romance, but there are certainly romantic elements, but they develop this sort of obsession and fascination with each other. And through Elizabeth and living in her home, the House of Hunger, Marion uncovers some dark secrets about everything. The secrets she uncovers sort of challenge everything she knows about the world and Elizabeth and herself. When it came to writing House of Hunger, I think I've always had a fascination with the figure of the Countess Bathory, and this book is loosely inspired by her. As a child, I was probably, I don't know, I was really young, too young to be watching this. I watched a movie about the Countess Bathory. I snuck behind my parents' back, got the Netflix DVD mailed to my house, and I secretly watched this movie about her, and I was just fascinated. I thought that she was so, it sounds wrong, but I thought she was so glamorous. I was just like, oh my goodness, like this woman with all this power doing these terrible things. And I felt kind of like ashamed by my fascination with this character. And over the years, you know, that just sort of stayed with me. And so it was kind of no surprise to me when I decided to, you know, write my own reimagining, my own take on this character, this historical figure that I was so fascinated by. But it was important to me that the story could stand on its own and not just be like a strict, you know, historical retelling. I love historical retellings, but I knew that I wanted to put my own spin on this. But at first, when I started drafting the book, it was really hard for me to find an in. I struggled to understand Marion's perspective, and I struggled to understand Elizabeth. And it just wasn't quite working in those early drafts. And I think what I realized was something that the author, Sally Rooney, author of Normal People, kind of explained in this video I watched recently. Every talk that Sally Rooney has ever given is amazing, by the way. I highly recommend listening to her. But she talked about how when it comes to writing, she's really fascinated by the dynamics between characters, more so than she is even the characters themselves. And that was kind of my approach to House of Hunger that really rang true to me, because what I realized was that House of Hunger centered around this dynamic or this tension between Marion and Elizabeth. And I sometimes describe the story as a game of cat and mouse, where these two characters are sort of contending with each other. They're very, very different, and yet I think very alike. And the way that they challenge and rival each other, the way that they desire each other, was something that really kept me on my toes while I was writing. And I think that that's the beating heart of the story, is this kind of question of what is going on between them. Like, is it obsession? Is it lust? Is it love? something I really focused on was this idea of having a very real connection with someone who maybe isn't good for you. I think that kind of sits at the heart of a lot of toxic or dark romances, but I was really fascinated by that element of their dynamic, of having this strong draw towards someone and this really pure, a connection that feels pure but maybe isn't, and how do you reconcile that, and what evolves from there. I don't want to like spoil the ending of my own book before it even releases, but I think, you know, it leads Marian to some dark places. I think it that sort of like descent into, at times while I was writing it, really what felt like madness, was really interesting to me. As a, you know, I consider myself like a dark fantasy and horror novel, and I thought that there was a lot of horror that was inherent to this toxic relationship, which maybe is just my stance on toxic relationships in general, but I really sort of dug deep into that and kind of tried to live that experience as much as I could through Marian. Another really like kind of point of fascination for me when I approached this book was just the aesthetics. Like I love luxury. I won't lie. I love decadence. I love pretty things. I love good food. I'm with Catherine there. When I was listening to Catherine talk about food, I was like, yes, because I was also like really fascinated with all of the food. It's literally called House of Hunger, and I was hungry for much of the time while I was writing this novel. But I really wanted to explore this world where it's just like, it's a world of excess and decadence. I think, you know, it's an interesting contrast, because I think some of the characteristics of the Victorian era, which, you know, this book is inspired by that time, there's a lot of emphasis placed on this idea of kind of like repression and restraint. But at the same time, the aesthetics of that period, I think, are very just very elaborate and decadent and beautiful, and I liked kind of the balance between those two. So yeah, I had like a whole Pinterest board like devoted to food, and then another one devoted to dresses, and then another one devoted to like all of the bedrooms and like the landscapes. And I really wanted readers to feel fully immersed in the world of House of Hunger, like as if the house was opening its doors to them. And in order to do that, I think that I really had to immerse myself. So there were definitely periods where I just kind of felt like almost like I was kind of living in a trance-like state, even when I wasn't actively writing House of Hunger, because in the back of my mind, it was always there. I think the house itself sort of almost like haunted me. Even now, like it's a massive house, it's a massive manor. Bigger than a manor probably, but I can see myself like walking through the halls. Like I know the outline of the house, the map, the blueprint. And yeah, it was just cool to kind of dig deep into a setting like that, because House of Hunger is a very isolated world. House of Hunger is on an island on an like Arctic northern sea, and not many people come in or out. Lisbeth never leaves the house. The Countess Lisbeth never leaves that house. And so I knew that if I was going to center this book in like one house, one place, that house had to be magnificent and had to have, you know, secrets and many layers. And that was something that I really worked to kind of achieve through the writing and rewriting of many drafts. So yeah, I think at its core, House of Hunger is a book that does explore this idea of a world that gives you everything, and it seems too good to be true, but it's so good that you don't really want to believe it. And I think that's kind of true for Marian's intense connection with the Countess Lisbeth and all of like the wealth and luxury that Lisbeth bestows on Marian. And I think there's also I hesitate to say like there's like a socially applicable theme, because my previous book, for those that are familiar with The Year of the Witching, it was kind of a book that was very much about feminism and kind of religious oppression, and those core themes that ran through the book. House of Hunger it doesn't have as much of a social like theme or stance. However, there are elements that are explored throughout the book that relate to class, namely the class disparity between Marian and the Countess Lisbeth, who employs her, and the sort of power imbalance that the difference in their classes kind of creates. I think, yeah, that element was really interesting to me. I think that particularly vampire stories, and Elizabeth isn't necessarily a capital V vampire, but it's definitely a vampiric story in that Elizabeth is consuming Marian's blood. Those stories tend to focus a lot on questions of power and power imbalances between like maybe like mortals and immortals, or wealthy people and poor people, aristocracy and people who are not aristocratic at all, like Marian. And so kind of addressing those elements through the course of the story was, yeah, of great interest to me. And I think that all of those things sort of contributed to, again, this core, arguably very toxic dynamic between Marian and Lisbeth. And I feel like, yeah, the story really does orbit around that. So yeah, thank you for letting me share a bit about House of Hunger. And I'm so happy to be here today. I can't wait to hear about everyone else's books.
Oh, thank you. There's just one question. What message do you want to convey with your readers or share?
What message do I want to convey with my readers or share with my readers? I think I would like people to kind of make space for stories that maybe address familiar themes in ways they wouldn't expect, maybe centering characters that haven't had the chance to be at the forefront. So whether that's a queer relationship that features a Black girl, or a toxic romance that's explored from the perspective of someone who maybe isn't white. Yeah, I would love just readers to be kind of more open to that, or look for those stories more after reading House of Hunger.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Alexis. Next author is Carolyn Nguyen. And Caroline grew up in Orange County, California, not appreciating the weather enough. She has a BA in journalism from Seattle University and an MS in human-centered design from the University of Washington. The youngest daughter of Vietnamese refugees, her writings focus on her mother's tall tales, superstition, the diaspora, and memory, both real and imaginary. She especially loves stories about messy Asian women who never learn from their mistakes. After living up and down the West Coast, she currently resides in Los Angeles with her rabbit and dog. She still doesn't appreciate the weather enough. When she's not writing, Carolyn daydreams about having iced coffee on a rooftop in Saigon. And you can follow her on Twitter at Carolyn K. Nguyen. Another quote that I wanted to share with you as well, this is from her editor, Lee. For the longest time, I didn't see Vietnamese American women like me in fiction. We were background characters, dead bodies, docile servants, fetishized fantasies, or suffering individuals traumatized by constant war. I always thought, there's so much more to our lives. There's so much to celebrate. Vietnamese women are joyful, loud, stubborn, angry, funny, loving. We are everything. Carolyn's big-hearted debut, The Fortunes of Jaded Women, is absolute proof. It follows various Vietnamese women's desperate lives, which intersects after a powerful psychic makes a startling prediction about their family's fate and happiness, layered with laugh out loud humor, some heartbreak, and healing. This vibrant novel is a life-affirming love letter to women everywhere. Welcome, Carolyn.
Thank you so much for having me. Oh gosh, every time I hear those words from my editor, Lonely, I always get so emotional, just because it's so special to have a Vietnamese American editor edit your book. But yeah, just to reiterate, like this is my, I just want to say again, thank you all for having me here. It's my debut book. And I'm just so excited to be sitting here talking to you all and to be on this panel with such esteemed other authors. I'm like, so yeah, I'm like fangirling out. But yeah, it took me almost like 10 years to get published. So it's a rather emotional journey for me to be sitting here. Just to dive a little bit deeper into what the book is about. The Fortunes of Jaded Women is about an estranged Vietnamese family of women set in Orange County, California. It's where I grew up. I grew up in Santa Ana near Little Saigon, which is one of the largest number of Vietnamese people outside of Vietnam itself. It's one of the largest Vietnamese diasporas. So it's just ripe with drama, ripe with like, I just grew up near that area, so I'm very familiar with it. So sorry, I might be coughing and I'm slightly congested. I'm recovering from COVID. So just like ignore me as I hack into your screens. But the story is about an estranged, like I said, an estranged Vietnamese family of women set in Orange County, California. It's a massive, massive cast. I think once you read it, you'll be quite shocked by how many characters there are. There's probably like 14 plus women. Even I can't even list them all out because sometimes I forget. It's just too many women. There's like the mothers, the three mothers, the mother's daughters, the mothers are sisters to each other, and then the cousins, and then the aunties. It's just, thankfully they gave me a family tree at the beginning because even I began to sort of like lose myself in all the characters, but that's like normal, especially for like Vietnamese families. It's just, there's too many people. There's always an auntie. You don't know how you're related to them, but somehow you just call them auntie or an uncle. But the story is about the main mother, Mai Nguyen, who is estranged from her other two sisters, and her own daughters like won't really even return her phone calls back to them. And so this estrangement has been going on for almost close like a decade. And so in her loneliness, she goes to visit a very famous Vietnamese psychic in Hawaii, who gives her 3 predictions for the year. She tells her that there will be a pregnancy, a death, and a marriage all within the family. The only question is whose prediction belongs to who. So that sort of sets into motion some sort of like a domino effect as Mai sets off to figure out, who's gonna die, who's gonna get pregnant, who's gonna get married. And that sort of brings the family back together for better or for worse. And like I mentioned, I'm a debut novelist. It took me 10 years to get published. I dropped out of my MFA program. I had written a couple of books that definitely went nowhere. This book is very close to my heart. I wanted to write about a contemporary Vietnamese American family. And I wanted to especially write beyond the Vietnam War. I find like our stories are always so heavy, laced with PTSD, war trauma, and like we've never been able to really elevate ourselves out of that pigeonhole. And I really just wanted to write like a joyful family story. And it really is like my love letter to Vietnamese American women, to my community. It spans multiple generations. And yeah, I just really wanted to write a joyful contemporary story about heartbreak, finding love. I have many different characters, and I really wanted to highlight that Vietnamese women and Asian women are not a monolith. We have such different personalities distinct from one another. There's like the Gen Z Vietnamese Asians who I'm like terrified of, but I find them fascinating because they just say what they want. They love raves. I've never been to a rave in my life, but I've seen people go and it looks kind of fun. I'll watch from afar. I'm not really a rave person, but I'm like fascinated by that type of like subculture. I wanted to write about the Vietnamese coffee shops in Orange County, which are famous for women wearing bikinis and selling coffee, right? It's like a very specific subculture again. And so I wanted to highlight these little different areas and pockets that truly make up the Vietnamese American diaspora. And, again, I wanted to write a very joyful story, but I cannot not touch on the Vietnam War because it had such a profound trickling impact on my parents' generation, I'm the daughter of refugees. If I ever choose motherhood one day, like I often wonder, will my kids, have that generational trauma as well? And so you can't not touch on the war. So I touch on it very slightly and briefly, but in the end, like I want readers to walk away with like some joy and some hope in these storylines. And so hopefully you laugh and cry along with these women, but you also like heal along with them as well. The inspiration for the book really is derived from a real life Vietnamese psychic in Hawaii. She's very much real. Everybody in the community knows who she is. Like people fly in all around the world to see this woman. She, again, fiction, so don't sue me, lady. It's all fiction. But she is like a real larger than life figure in the community. I have friends whose mothers, they fly in yearly to see this woman on the same day, the last 10 years, obviously pre-pandemic, right? You can't go see her now. Because I don't think you can walk in anymore. Like you can't walk into Mortar, right? So like pre-pandemic. So so I was really so inspired by that because, in like a diaspora community, we have these larger than life figures that we often build up in our minds as like legends, right? Like who were they before the war, who are they now? And so this woman is very much a real life figure. And so that's the genesis of the origin of the Fortunes of Jaded Women. And I myself flew in 5 years ago to see this woman, just out of sheer morbid curiosity. And I heard about her for so long. So it's crazy because, yeah, she had predicted when I would sign with my agent, when I would sign with my editor, and she predicted when I'd become an author. So I'm sitting here talking to you all now, and it's been insane. I won't see her ever again because I'm terrified of her. I will never go back. I've had my fill. I'm good on her. But yeah, so that's my spiel, and thank you all so much for listening to me and in my congested voice.
No problem. Just a question. I mean, I can see you had some inspiration, but who or what inspired you mainly to write this book?
Honestly, probably like my mother. I find like Vietnamese mothers to be unintentionally funny. And my mother is quite literal in her with her words, but that's why it's often so funny to me. Like there are lines directly pulled from my mother in the book. And people, oh, where'd you come up with these lines? They're so funny. And I was like, I've been hearing it my entire life. Like things like, flip-flops will give you cancer, what was it? Oh, she's like definitely afraid of taxes, even though we've been middle class our entire lives. You know what I mean? She's like really, she's just like has fear of the government, things like that, obviously with taxes, and everything should be paid in cash. No traces back to you. And so just like things like, again, very unintentionally, very funny, but, I grew up with these women, like that's my mother. My aunts were exactly the same in Vietnam, just very like unintentionally funny. And I think like the love language in Vietnamese culture is, what's the word? We like to like roast each other quite a bit, and so the love is often in a form of like a lot of insults, right? And so that's what I wanted to display, that type of joy, even though it can be misconstrued in other ways. But it's a very, again, just really wanted to highlight that type of like distinct diaspora culture in this book. And yeah, I just wanted to be humorous because I find the women in my family to be unintentionally very funny, and I have a thick skin because of it. So yeah.
Thank you. The next one is Vanessa Riley. Vanessa is an award-winning author of historical romance, mystery, and fiction novels featuring realistic, multicultural communities and powerful persons of color. To fuel her interest in the Regency and early Victorian eras, she made time for attending Renaissance fairs and consuming period novels and films while obtaining her PhD in mechanical engineering and a master's in industrial engineering and engineering management from Stanford University, as well as a BS and an MS in mechanical engineering from Penn State University. A frequent speaker at literary, women's, and STEM events, she lives in Atlanta, Georgia, with her military husband and teenage kid. You could also visit her online at vanessariley.com. All of our, all of the authors had quite a few quotes, and I only grabbed one quote for each. And this is the one that I want to share with you guys. This is a great read to add to your current must-read list by Essence Magazine. Abigail's complex world, a mix of family, Caribbean immigrants, and the ton is exactly the world's readers today are eager to discover and to return to, calling all Regency enthusiasts, historical mystery fans, and Bridgerton devotees. This one's for you. And I was a Bridgerton devotee, so I was excited to read this as well. So what I also liked is, Vanessa, the way you honored your mother and said, you wrote this book for my mother to thank her for the countless hours of Matlock, Remington Steele, and Murder, She Wrote we enjoyed. I love those well. So when I read that, I'm like, oh my goodness, all the things that but welcome, Vanessa.
Oh, thank you so much. And my mom, we started with the black and white TV, and then we moved up to the big color, and she loved watching her mysteries. There was not a Sunday that we did not see Murder, She Wrote. Now I might be slightly dating myself by these admissions. But I think on this panel, although this is my first historical mystery, it's like book number 22-ish of my collection. So they're old enough to drink now. And so I'm just so excited to be here with Brodart. I'm listening to Catherine talk about food and history. I'm listening to Alexis talk about the opulence and beauty of the Victorian society. And I'm listening to Carolyn talking about finding those moments of joy, of being able to showcase a people and a place that's so different than what we are accustomed to or what has been published before. I specialize between 1750 to 1830. And many might know me from Island Queen, which is a historical fiction about a true woman who lived in the 1750s. She almost made it to 100 years. Amazing woman going from enslavement. Sorry. That was my alarm. Sorry about that. At the completely wrong time. Okay. She goes from enslavement to becoming one of the wealthiest women in the world, has an affair with a prince. I mean, it's all this things you would not expect. And my latest book, Sister Mother Warrior, is about two women, the Haitian Revolution, things that we should know about, places that we should visit, things, that history has at one point was famous, but has been discarded or hidden. I believe in bringing those back to the surface. And so when I was doing research for Sister Mother Warrior, I came across this very odd fact that in 1806, when Haiti becomes free, all the abolition movements in the world stop. Wilberforce, Macaulay, Clarkson, Audubon, everybody, whether you're in Scotland, America, all the abolition movements stop. It's like, we were good with y'all being free, but now y'all want to run stuff. So I was like, what does a world look like where the good intentions of the do-gooders are now stopped? And how would you get things back started? So I started doing more research and looking at the newspaper clippings during that time frame. And I found this world of politics that's different than the vision we have of a lot of the people who are now heroes in history. And I was like, how can I bring this to the world and yet have some fun? Because, you know, my historical fictions are a little deep, right? My romances are lighter, but they're all centered around bringing true history back to the forefront. So I imagined a heroine, someone who would be able to try and use good, her privilege, to make the world start again. So I have Lady Worthing, her first book, this is Murder in Westminster. She is trying to get the abolition movement starting. She is attending secret meetings. She is meeting with Hannah More. She's meeting with the famed people of the Abolition Society that have actually gone underground at this point, because they don't know how the politics are going to shake out. And they need to maintain their stances in the political realm, because they got to get reelected to parliament so that they can actually affect change. So you have this woman who's made of Scottish and Jamaican heritage. My father's from Trinidad and Tobago. I always bring West Indian culture because that's part of the world that was during the Regency. Out of every $5, $4 comes directly from the West Indies, unfortunately from enslavement dollars, but it's directly coming from that world. So you have Abby, she's trying to get the world started again, but she's also an amateur sleuth, primarily because being half Scottish and half Jamaican, she's got a double portion of second sight, because both populations have that. Second sight is that, oh my God, did I just do that? It's that deja vu thing. Sometimes it's dreams, but you can sometimes see images of what's happening. Unfortunately, if you don't understand how this gift works, you don't get the full picture. You can't pick out who's going to die or how they're going to die or who's the guilty person. It just lets you know that things are happening. And so Abby's struggling with this as she's trying to figure out her place in the world, because she's a woman of privilege. Some people accept her in society, some people do not. She has money, but can she spend it everywhere that she wants to? For the research in the book, I'm taking you to actual restaurants. So Catherine, this is where we're gonna hook up. I take you to actual restaurants, and roast beef was a big thing back then, and so you get a lot of restaurants. A lot of roast beef is consumed in this first novel, and cheese, roast beef and cheeses and things like that. But Abby, and because Abigail in the past has helped the magistrate, because detective is actually not a word back then. So she's a sleuth. So she's a helper. She's a puzzler. She is trying to use her skills to help, once again, bring good in the world. And that's actually how she met her husband. He was in a pickle, and she solved the problem. He didn't get hung for embezzlement. And they got a marriage of convenience, which gives her a title of a baron, gives her access to money. Unfortunately, her family wasn't happy about this. So she loses half of her family because she's married somebody that they didn't want her to marry. She was looking at the good that this could potentially bring. And you're going to meet her family. You're going to meet the cousin, the mathematician, who is working for the actual first woman computer. They call her a computer because she was a mathematician. She works for this woman. So there's maybe some side math jokes. That's where the STEM comes in, boys and girls, and engineering. You're going to get some of that in there. And you're going to meet the Prince Regent is rumored to have a man who got things done for him. He was a man of color. He worked the underworld. You're going to meet somebody very similar to that in this novel, who is Abby's godfather. Get it? Godfather. So anyway, but Abby is not, she's trying to find her way. She's got crazy relatives. She's trying to figure things out. And she's feuding with her neighbor. Her neighbor is a war hero. He served with Lord Nelson, who at this moment in time is a god to the English people, and he's just died. So the Regency is this Georgian time period, 1806, is actually in mourning because of Nelson. And so this man who served right under Nelson, who was there the day Nelson was killed, is her next door neighbor. And he's a curmudgeon, a sexy, cute curmudgeon, but he's still a curmudgeon. And he's got these two dogs that are greyhounds, and they are terrorizing her terrier. Y'all know it's the other way around, right? Little terriers, but I digress. But they've been fighting about these dogs. So he decides to put up a fence to separate their two townhouses in the Westminster district of London. And his estranged wife is found dead on the fence, but on Abby's side of the property. Abby knows that she potentially could be a suspect, and she knows she's now has to work with this man she's been fighting with in order to find out who really did it. But she thinks he really did it. But she's got to work with him anyway, because he gave her an alibi the night of the murder, because she can't say she was at a secret abolition meeting, because that would ruin the movement that she's trying to start. So she has to work with Stapleton Henderson, and we'll see how that goes. Because once again, he's kind of a slightly sexy Moriarty type, but you'll find that out in later books. This is the first one in the series, Murder in Westminster. It's setting up the world so you can see the landscape. We're bringing in the actual politics of the time, and people going to die. So it's going to be a fun time.
Wonderful. Thank you, Vanessa. Appreciate it. Elenita, do we have a couple of minutes left?
We have a couple of minutes, but there's two questions that came in from the audience. One of them is for Alexis. When is the sequel for the Year of Witching coming out? And then one for Catherine about the places in the book. Are they real places? Were the clubs and boarding houses real places? So you guys can answer those. And I think Carol has a couple questions for Vanessa as well.
All right. So we answer the first one was to, who was it? Alexis?
Yeah. So I'll keep it really short. The sequel to the Year of the Witching, I began to write it. Also began to have a breakdown. It was a pandemic book. It wasn't going well. And so I essentially reached like a stalemate where I was like, I can't do this right now. Like, I need a minute. I need time. And my editor, who is Jess Wade, wonderful, gracious, incredibly kind, incredibly empathetic and understanding, essentially gave me the opportunity to write a different book while I figure out the Year of the Witching. The Year of the Witching is interesting because I wrote it really quickly, and the sequel, it seems like the opposite of that. I would not be at all surprised if this is like my 10-year book. So I'm giving it time to like stew and develop, because I'm just determined to give you guys something that's worth reading, and I refuse to give you something that is any less than what I feel like is my best. So I'm really sorry that I don't have it for you now and might not for some time, but yeah, that's what's going on.
Fantastic. Catherine, the other question was for you.
Yeah, so a good majority of the places in the Two Lives of Sarah, for example, Claiborne Temple, are absolutely positively places that exist or did exist. The Scarlet Poplar is a fictional place, but it was based on a lot of other boarding houses like, as Vanessa was speaking about, history that has been lost to us, through time, atrocity, apathy, and cruelty, really all three. So I based the Scarlet Poplar off of older boarding houses that I heard of, or, motels that were catering only to African-American travelers, such as like the A.G. Gaston Motel, the Lorraine Motel, as well, which is also mentioned in the Two Lives of Sarah. But the Scarlet Poplar, it's fictionalized. The Iris Club, which is what I'm assuming you're speaking about, that's also a fictionalized place. Like, the funny thing with historical fiction is it's still fiction, but you have to make sure you're basing it on, things that were there, things that it would have made sense for them to be there. So the Iris Club and the Scarlet Poplar are fictional places. But, a lot of the other places that I mentioned in and around Memphis are absolutely positively real places.
Fantastic. Thank you. We have about 4 minutes left, but Vanessa, if you could just share with us or walk us through your writing process.
Okay. I do, it always begins with research, begins and ends with research. So research, research, research. I am looking for things. I'm looking for women who've done dynamic things that we should know their names, particularly women who were famous in their days. And when I can't find that, I'm looking at circumstances. I'm looking at the politics. I have a timeline where I have 1750 to 1830, all of the what's happened in the world, because the world was a lot smaller. If you were in the islands, you knew what was happening in London. You knew what was happening in those darn Americans. You knew because the merchants would bring news. I mean, it was the commerce. It was a much smaller place. So that I start with that. When I begin writing, I'm looking at this timeline. It's my focal point for either my characters' lives or the incident I'm trying to write about. I write a very fast, quick, dirty draft. I mean, dirty draft, ugly draft. If anybody looked at this draft, they'd say, she got how many degrees? I don't think so. No, no. But it's all about getting to the end goal so that you have no sagging middle, that you're pushing towards the goals. The second pass is where you dress it up. So now I'm looking at my character motivations. I am putting in because if you read Vanessa Riley, you're going to be there. You're going to smell the sights. You're going to taste the food. You're going to feel the cloth, the fabrics, all the things that you would expect if you were dropped right in to wherever I'm putting you. I'm going to take you there. The color of the sky, the feel in the air, the smell of horse leavings on the street. You're going to see it all. When you get a Vanessa Riley book. That all comes in the second layer. And then I go over it the third time, and this is smoothing it out and making sure that the points that I want the characters to be expressing, to leave the reader with, that's all in that third pass. So it's a 3-pass system, once again, starting always with research and ending with the smoothing and making sure that I'm making the statements I want to make.
Fantastic. Elenita, I saw there's 2 more extra questions. Do you want to share those?
The one question is, Vanessa, are you also pursuing an engineering career?
Not anymore. I'm now a full-time writer as of this year.
All right.
I'm right. I had I have a storied career in telecommunications. Worked with NASA, worked with General Motors, people who drove a certain model of Cadillac. It was quiet because of me. But now I'm very fortunate to be able to. I've always had 2 passions: mathematics and writing. And math took the wheel for a very long time, and now writing is getting to have its fun. So
fantastic. Wonderful. Is there another one? Last one?
It was a repeated question about the Alexis's book. So thank you very much, and we want to thank our sponsors: Kensington, Penguin Random House Library Marketing, HarperCollins Park Row Books, and Simon & Schuster's Atria Books as well. And thank you so much, all the panelists. This was wonderful. This has been recorded. You will get a copy of the recording if you've signed up. And just really enjoyed your books. Can't wait for everybody to read them and see them in the New York Times bestseller list. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.